Hello everyone. Today we talk about Plato. Not only Plato, but the Republic of Plato. And not only that, the middle books of Plato's Republic, which is the apex of philosophy for some people. For me, it is Plato at his most confident, ambitious, constructive, his most brilliant, his most important, which doesn't mean that you will agree or that you will like it, only that you will have to think about it. Because if Plato is right about what he says in the middle books, then that's really important. And he might not be right, we'll see. So we can't talk about Plato without talking about his teacher, the fabulous Socrates, and the relationship, and how Plato took the questioning of Socrates, the endless, brilliant, and not entirely satisfactory, I shouldn't say that, not entirely successful. He didn't get what he was after. He said, I am the wisest of men because I know that I don't have knowledge. What did his wisdom consist in? It consisted in that. He knew he didn't have knowledge. Another way to say that is he knew the difference between his opinions and real knowledge. Now, he then is executed on trumped up, corrupt charges by some very powerful individuals who said that he wasn't teaching the young men to observe the gods that were in control of the state. And he was a free thinker, and he just questioned everybody about everything. And the sophists especially didn't like him because he had this ability to show that they didn't really know or care about knowledge, let alone wisdom. So Plato, as a young man, sets out to write first about the teachings of Socrates. And he does that in this gorgeous apology, the apologia, the defense, not saying sorry. It's a defense that Socrates gives in the court that Plato took notes and remembered and wrote up a beautiful dialogue. And the next one, after Socrates is condemned, is the Crito, where his friends come together to be with Socrates on the day that he's to drink poison and be executed and die. Really a martyr for philosophy. The father of philosophy is executed for being a philosopher, a philosophical inquirer. Plato, inspired by this, then sets out to write those two dialogues to tell about Socrates, and then slowly but noticeably, he begins to try to answer the questions that Socrates was asking, especially, what is knowledge? What is real knowledge that will stand still, that will be reliable, that would be universal, that everyone could see and say, yes, the way we do when we hear, say, a Mozart or a Beethoven, we say that's objective. If anybody doesn't like that, they really should listen again, or they should do something to figure out what's wrong with them, or whatever. The Taj Mahal. Could anybody not love the Taj Mahal? Well, impossible. Well, that's what Plato set out to get, the kind of knowledge that was certain. Now, one of the ways he tried to do this is to say that anything that would come up against it would just lead it to get stronger, clearer, more absolute, more definite, more reliable, etc. Okay, so in the Republic, Plato sets out to answer the question, what is justice? Now, when we think about what is justice, we probably would do what Aristotle did. We would read a lot of constitutions. And we would do a lot of inquiries. We would read the history of political theory. We would do what John Adams did when he was arguing for this way of understanding the history of government, or Jefferson or Madison working on the Bill of Rights. They would say, well, these constitutions have that, or they're not so good because they don't have that, and they would make an agreement and settle. But Plato said, but you know, you're still really only dealing with averages or approximations. You're dealing with opinions. I'm after knowledge. So he then looks at the human being. And he says, what the state is the ideal human being writ large. All right? Now, he wants to figure out the parts of the human being and how they could be, live in harmony, how a person could be properly sort of put together with all their intellectual part, their appetitive part, their energy part, their etc. And he decides that people are really different from each other, and there are probably three groups. They're the people who really come eager and able to think. They're candidates to be philosophers. Now, philosophy is, Plato and Aristotle understood it, includes really all the fields, maybe not chemistry, but everything else. Not modern science, but cosmology for sure. So a person would have to really love thinking much more than some other things. They would have to give up the other things in order to think hard, long. You'd have to do mathematics, and you'd have to, in Plato's view, you know, you'd have to do music, and you'd have to meditate, and and you also have to enter into dialogue. You'd have to hear all the objections to your ideas till you build up to the idea that doesn't need to be revised in any way. Okay, so he decides that each person has these three, but some people have a lot of this knowledge appetite or capacity. Then these other people are more spirited, energetic. They're really in the realm of feeling life. All right, they're good at relationships. They're good. They might be good storytellers or something like that. But it's not quite knowledge. Not quite getting at the concepts that can help us to decide what is beautiful, what is just, what is, what is true. Okay, then the third part really has to do with power, it has to do with sex, it has to do with very physical, and some people are born to that, and they're laborers, and they work all day, they come home, and basically they want to have a good meal, they want to have a glass of wine, they want to have sex, and that's fine. But nowadays they just want to go on their computers, but they don't really want to think hard about philosophy. All right, now he says, the state similarly has these three parts. That's the thinking people, then the spirit people, and the most people who are the very physical people. But how will they hold together? Well, the same way that the human being ideally holds together, by having the higher principle control the next and the next. So this is a hierarchical philosophy. It's what some people don't like about Plato, because he likes the top more than he likes the bottom. All right? The top is the best, and the top is justice or love or beauty, and they come from and kind of long for something even higher that he calls the good. A little bit like in the Abrahamic religions, God. In fact, St. Augustine, in the 4th century, 3rd century, who knew Plato's philosophy, said, he learned it from Plotinus, but it's still Plato's philosophy. He said that the ideas that Socrates was looking for and that Plato said that he found were all in the mind of God. That God has the ideas of good, true, beauty. In fact, God is the good and has these ideas, love, truth, beauty, justice, etc. All right. Now, how do we know this? How do we find out if it's true? Well, you have to, if you start getting really, really close, then you say to some other people in a dialogue, ideally, if you get somebody to listen to you long enough and respond and go back and forth, we're going to keep climbing. We're going to go back and forth until we get to the pure essence. Now, Plato says it's really hard because we're at a level where we hardly can believe that this is possible. It's like we are in a cave, and we are used to looking at the wall with a light, a fire behind us, and we think the shadows are real. And that's the only thing we know. We're looking at physical objects which, compared to realities, are like shadows. And they're impermanent. They're fleeting. And they come and go. Bodies come and go. Perceptions come and go. Daylight, night come and go. We're looking at the idea, the concept that doesn't come and go. Now, suppose someday, Plato says, Socrates actually, Plato doesn't appear in the dialogues, he writes the dialogues, and Socrates is his inquirer. And so, suppose someday somebody were to go up out of the cave, out of our ordinary way of thinking, when we think we have knowledge that we don't really have, would go up out of the cave and for the first time see the sun. That is light. That's not like the little flame behind us. This is light. This is capital L light, capital S sun. This is good, true beauty, everything good. And would then realize the radical, almost embarrassing contrast between what that person thought was knowledge, which was just opinion in a cave and shadows, from real knowledge, which is having a direct experience of the source of all knowledge, the sun, which stands in for the good, the form. Okay, now, then Plato says, what would happen, or Socrates, sorry, if that person went back into the cave and said, hey, guess what I found? There's a way out of the cave, up onto the ground, onto the earth, in front of the sun. We could actually know a totally different level above mathematics to the good itself. What would happen? Well, would they believe him? No, they would kill him. Exactly what they did to Socrates. So the first line of the Republic is, Socrates went down. Some people think that that's the beginning of Plato taking the reader into the cave and saying, are you satisfied with this? Are you satisfied with that? Do you think this is truth? This is knowledge? Do you think this is just? Let's keep going, 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 going. And then he establishes what's called the divided line, and above, way up at the top, is the good, and under the good is these forms, love, truth, beauty, justice. Under that there are other essences, all right, human, all right, and maybe threeness, triangularity, so that all the triangles share in that particular form called three. Interestingly, Bertrand Russell, who was not ordinarily thought of as a spiritual idealistic philosopher, in his Problems of Philosophy, he talks about three is an absolute essence. Very Platonic. But then Russell was also not just a philosopher, he was also a mathematician. And it could be, but almost all mathematicians are kind of Platonists, because they're dealing with pure essences that don't depend on physical objects, just the reverse. And this is the point of Plato, or at least the Plato of the Republic. The physical objects depend on the essences. And that's what Plato was after, the essence. Now, you could sort of like the allegory, but it has a problem. And if you're really thinking hard, or in a calm state of mind, and you really think this through, you should see the problem. It is that it divides some people who claim to know, really know, in a way that kind of dismisses or discredits other kinds of knowing and other people who know. And so it makes this strong division between the one who kind of intuits something very, very high and pure and unchanging, and everybody else. This is dangerous because some people who think they have special knowledge, they actually declare war, or they create an unfair state, or they give out certain dogmas that get people to believe in them because they're supposed to know better than everybody else. This is not democratic. In fact, it's hierarchical. And maybe if you construct a state on the basis of these ideas, and some people who are in charge of them, called the guardians, and they're in charge of everybody else because they know the forms, it could be that the people who are under the thumb of the guardians are living in a completely unfair, unjust life. Because the people who claim to know justice actually don't. They only think they do. How do you find out? So Plato rightly asks, who will guard the guardians? Big problem, okay? So then he sets the whole republic up, men and women are equal, but guardians are guardians by birth. Other people are what they are by birth all the way down. So it's a very strong, firm caste system. It's gold, it's silver and bronze, all right, all the way down by certain soul qualities. And you don't change that. Very like caste. So this may be too strict, maybe too authoritarian. It may not give any of what is thought to be one of the great advantages to the United States, which is a mobile class system. Maybe it's not as mobile as it used to be, and maybe it's not even mobile at all, but it probably is pretty mobile compared to certainly what Plato had in mind, where you are what you are by birth. Okay, so the whole philosophy is that there are essences, there are ideals, they are real, they can be known, and they must be known, otherwise you will confuse infatuation for love. You will confuse something ordinary, some totally pedestrian, boring, hardcore, violent kind of music or art for something that is sublime. You just won't get what is truly beautiful. You can't hear the Beethoven, whatever. Okay. You know, I always do Mozart, Beethoven. You can do your own examples of, so long as it's Mozart, Beethoven, but Raphael, we are great. Okay. So, but if you don't see that, then you can argue with Plato and say, no. You think it's this, but actually, no, because it has to have more tension or more this or that. I actually challenge you on that, but that's where the big argument goes. Now, this is interesting that Plato himself thinks of the arguments against this very dramatic achievement in the middle of the Republic. And his student, think about this, three generations, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, in Athens, all right? Plato, the student of Socrates, Aristotle, the student of Plato. Aristotle begins his philosophy by talking about the limitations of this idea of the forms. Interestingly, all 5 of those arguments are in Plato. So Plato is such a great philosopher that after he builds up this philosophy with great confidence and enthusiasm, conviction, this is really it, he then tears it apart. He doesn't tear it apart. He chips away and chips away. And then, toward the end, he tries to bring the Republic to a city in Syracuse, in Italy, and the anti-authoritarian forces rise up, and he barely escapes with his life. He was invited by a prince, and the prince couldn't actually protect him. He had to leave. Okay. And then, the last book that Plato writes, this is now 1,700 pages of philosophy, beautiful, all dialogues, all careful, back, forth, like that. The last book he writes is 3 times longer than the Republic, and it's called laws. After utopia fails, all right, you get something worse than something that is non-utopia, that a non-utopia attempt that fails, which usually brings about chaos. Like after revolution is usually chaos, okay? So Plato then wrote what is the minimum that you need for, not the maximum, the minimum that you need for a just society. You need law. Law. Okay, 3 times the length, very careful. So Plato, in the laws, Plato says, where conflicting thinking arises when conflicting perceptions arise. All right? So he's got that from Socrates. And he takes Socrates as far as he can and answers in a certain sense how Socrates could be the wisest of men without knowledge because he knew that there are these forms. Plato knows that there are these forms, and he thinks he knows them in the Republic. He knows what love is in the Symposium. He knows some other forms. But then after a while, because he's so brilliant, he keeps asking, do I have that exactly right? Do I have the exact? And he gets dissatisfied, and he thinks of these brilliant arguments against. So Plato's whole philosophy is like a great drama. It builds up and then slightly comes down. And it's time to build up again. And that leaves the way for his totally astonishingly brilliant student, Aristotle, who writes in a more systematic, careful way, organized by different disciplines, the same disciplines we still have, the metaphysics, the epistemology, the biology, psychology, aesthetics, ethics, politics, and many other fields. They're all like that organized, but now without claiming that there are the forms, claiming rather that if we study very widely, we'll be able to deduce able to draw out the common elements, and that's what we should do. That's good philosophy, and it turns out, because they were both so brilliant, so productive, so everything, that basically the history of Western thought, and that includes everybody hearing this tape, is more or less a Platonist or an Aristotelian. Some people try to be both. I think Thomas Aquinas is thought to be an Aristotelian, but after all, Aristotle was a little bit of a Platonist, and Thomas Aquinas is a Platonist and an Aristotelian. Some other people are very much combinations. Mathematicians tend to be Platonists, and social scientists tend to be Aristotelian. I don't think you can see that, all right? So so often it's quoted, and I'm going to quote and end the talk with this wonderful line from Alfred North Whitehead, one of the truly wise philosophers of the 20th century, who wrote that the safest generalization of the history of Western philosophy is that it consists in a series of footnotes to Plato. But then there are Aristotelians who, I think they said, they should have said, yes, and Aristotle wrote all the footnotes. So basically we have this choice. It's hard to go elsewhere, because these two kind of cover what the history of Western thought. Those are your options. So give Plato a good read, a good think. See if you are Platonist, and you can't find out except by thinking, and thinking along the line of going from opinion to knowledge. Or see if you want to do more of a sort of a generalization based on examples. And get ready, because as soon as you finish that, Plato will say, but every one of those examples is what it is, and you know what it is because you have the form. And Aristotle says, no, you only got the form because you saw the examples, and you wouldn't know that you did that unless you started where I start. They start in different places, they finish in different places, and those are our two great choices in this text, this course on wisdom texts. Plato's wise, Aristotle's wise, and they're really different. They're not totally incompatible, but pretty close. So, thank you very much. That's the introduction to the middle books of the Republic.